you've been trying to lose those last 10 pounds of belly fat, or perhaps most of that fat is concentrated around your lower back, some in your love handles, maybe a good portion of it is dangling off your face. The point is, you've been blaming your genetics, you've been blaming your diet, that's why you're constantly slashing calories, and maybe you're even pointing the finger at your workout plan. Here is the truth. It's none of those things, and may have everything to do with how you're walking and how much you're walking on a daily basis. So in this video, I'm going to share with you all the walking mistakes that are keeping you fat and preventing you from keeping that belly fat off forever. So let's get into the first cardinal sin that most people make at the start of their fitness journey, and throughout their fitness journey, in fact, and that is they become complacent with their walking average or their step goal. They start off with a goal, for example, to walk an hour a day, and they actually stay at that goal for the duration of their weight loss / fat loss journey. They never bother to actually increase their activity level. In fact, some of you, as you get further along in your calorie deficit and you start to experience exhaustion, you start to feel tired, you start to feel sluggish, you even start decreasing your steps, decreasing your activity level. So that, unfortunately, is not only going to cause you to hit that fat loss plateau a lot sooner, but may actually cause you to even gain some weight. You might even see that weight scale trickle up towards the end of your calorie deficit. Complacency is always going to kick you in the ass throughout life, especially when it comes to activity level. You cannot stick to the same amount of steps that you started off your fat loss journey with. If you started off walking an hour a day, you're going to have to get into the habit of gradually increasing those steps over time, because your body is going to get used to not only the number of calories you're consuming on a daily basis, it's not only going to get used to the amount of weight you're putting on the barbell or the amount of weight that you're lifting with your free weights, your dumbbells, for example, but it's also going to get accustomed to your initial activity level. Chances are that activity level is probably the lowest that it's ever going to be, right? Maybe you went from being extremely sedentary to suddenly, throughout your fat loss deficit, you started to get into the groove of things. You started to settle into a rhythm of walking constantly. So you need to keep your body, so to speak, on its toes, right? You got to keep it guessing. You got to make it adjust to a gradually increasing activity level. So you cannot stick to the same step goal that you start off your fat loss journey with. And the worst possible thing to do is not just complacency, but is to actually go in freaking reverse. You can't decrease your activity level either. If you started off walking an hour a day, you cannot now bump that down to 30 minutes a day. In fact, another thing I see a lot of people doing quite a bit is taking rest days when it comes to walking. Walking is low intensity steady state cardio. It's not going to spike your heart rate significantly. It's barely going to get you into zone 2 cardio. So it's not going to spike your cortisol levels. It's not going to spike your hunger hormone. So there's very little reason that you need to take a rest from walking. You need a rest day, yes, from lifting weights, but you do not need a rest from walking. So by taking those rest days and by decreasing your activity level, you're not only going to make it easier for your body to hit metabolic adaptation towards the beginning of your fat loss journey, but as I mentioned at the start, you might even start to see some weight come right back, right? You might see your weight start to increase the next time you hop on the weight scale. So that's the first mistake that I see a lot of people making when they're trying to lose belly fat, especially the last few pounds, the lower abdominal fat. The second mistake I see is that people are obsessed with this 10,000 step number, People think that 10,000 steps is the end all, be all of daily walking, when in fact, it's just a bare minimum. It sure as hell is never the destination, especially if you're trying to be a high volume daily walker. And even if that's not your goal, if you're just trying to be more active than the next person, then 10,000 steps is just the entry point to daily walking. 10,000 steps was just a marketing ploy that was developed by a Japanese odometer company. Might have mentioned this in a previous video, but they actually just came up with a nice round even number like 10,000 in order to sell those odometers. There's no scientific reason behind 10,000 steps being the ideal step goal for most folks. When you start off your fat loss journey, you're going to lose a lot of water weight in the beginning. And chances are, if you're walking 10,000 steps from the get-go, you're also going to see some fat loss, right? You're going to see some of that fat come off much faster too, because your body has not gotten used to those 10,000 steps, right? So you see anywhere from 250 to 500 calories being, depleted away thanks to walking 10,000 steps. But once again, your body is going to get used to that activity level. So if you start off at 10,000 steps, your body gets used to 10,000 steps, suddenly you're not losing, you're not burning 250 calories, 500 calories. You're losing a lot less, maybe half of that or barely any at all, the further you get along in your fat loss journey. So 10,000 steps is just going to be the beginning. You're going to have to gradually increase that step count over time. You cannot become complacent. And if anything, 10,000 steps, just remember this, it's just a nice, even, round number. It means very little. It's not enough to keep you lean and keep you ripped year round. So that's the second mistake that I see a lot of people making. The third mistake is that when people start walking every single day, they think they can knock out a majority of their steps outside. And I agree, walking outside definitely has its benefits, right? It gets you a lot more sunlight, a lot more vitamin D. It allows you to literally go outside and touch grass. But you cannot rely on outdoor walking as your main route by which to knock out your steps, because depending on where you live, depending on where you're situated in the world, you're not always going to have ideal weather conditions. It can be a completely shitty day. It could be a completely shitty afternoon if you decide to go for an evening walk and then you just find yourself in pouring rain or stormy weather. So you cannot walk on outdoor walks alone. In fact, most folks are going to spend a majority of their time indoors, especially on work days, on weekdays. So you have to get into the habit of splitting your time between outdoors and indoors. And moreover, you have to get into the practice of doing more indoor walks, right? You have to space your walking throughout the day, and you got to line up those walks with each of your daily activities, right? You can no longer be like everyone else out there sitting to do most of your menial daily tasks. You best believe you got to knock out most of those tasks while you're walking around. And I don't care if you're in an office, you're at home, you're at your family's home, just get it done however you can, right? Take those phone calls while walking around. Answer those text messages, emails while walking around. Outdoor walks are going to be great for weekends, right? For holidays, etc. But you cannot rely primarily on outdoor walking, especially if your goal is to stay lean for life, because as I mentioned in the previous point, you're going to have to progressively overload on that step count. And by just relying on outdoor walking, like a morning walk at the start of the day and an evening walk at the end of the day, it's not going to be enough. And it's definitely not going to put you in the best possible position to progressively overload gradually over time. In fact, most of that progressive overload is going to come through your indoor walks, right? Those walks between meals, those walks during conference calls, those walks when you're responding to emails, or maybe you're a content creator. You can even knock out some of those walks while you're editing a video, while you're posting content. That's how I'm doing it nowadays. I have a routine built to where as soon as I record a video outside, which I'm doing while walking around, by the way, right? It's not a coincidence I do all of my recording while I walk around, walk and talks. But when it comes time for me to edit the videos and do all of the post-production work, like the titles, thumbnails, descriptions, tags, and all of that stuff, I'm doing it while I'm constantly walking around. I will not doing that sitting down, let alone even standing up. So that's going to allow me to easily take what was previously a 30 to 45 minute, maybe even an hour long activity that I was doing previously on old channels like the Acestar Health channel or the Acestar Lifestyle channel. Lots of sitting down to do post-production work, and now I'm doing all that post-production work while constantly walking around, and that's giving me extra steps, 3,000, 4,000, 4,500 steps, even 6,000 steps if that's an activity that lasts for over an hour. So relying just on outdoor walking is basically going to allow you to not progressively overload, and it's going to make it that much difficult for you to gradually increase your steps over time. So that's another big walking mistake that you're making. The next mistake that I see is people not walking after meals. Almost everyone, they have a huge ass carb infested meal and they decide to stay parked on their butt and digest their meal. 30 minutes, an hour, or even an hour at a time. That is not ideal for digestion. It's certainly not ideal to gradually and on a long-term basis boost your insulin sensitivity, right? You want to make sure that your glucose molecules that are being ejected from your meal, so your body is going to break down the carbohydrates, the complex carbs that you consume in your meal, into simple sugars, into glucose molecules. You want those glucose molecules to be immediately responsive to insulin being released from your pancreas. If you decide to sit and deprive your body the chance to be more responsive to insulin, then over time your body is going to naturally become more and more resistant to insulin, and in turn that's going to increase, unfortunately, your risk for developing type 2 diabetes. So besides the leanness benefits of walking after a meal, there are also chronic disease prevention benefits as well from walking after a meal. Now let's get back to the leanness benefits. By walking after a meal, you can significantly stack even more steps depending on the amount of times you eat in a day. And hopefully you guys are eating full meals, right? You're not constantly snacking throughout the day. And if you decide to eat 3 to 4 square meals a day, that's easily 10 minutes after every single meal. 10 minutes of walking, by the way, is a quick and easy 1,000 steps. So if you eat 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's a quick and easy 3,000 steps just after meals alone. Now, that is just for starters, right? That's for those of you who are just starting your daily walking journey, for those of you who are probably at the start of your overall fat loss / weight loss journey. This might be a little out there. Definitely something that I do on a daily basis. I wouldn't recommend this for beginners and not even for intermediate level walkers. This is more of an advanced tip, so take this with a grain of salt. Maybe save this for when you start consistently crossing over 25k steps and you're wondering, how do I get from 25k steps a day to 30,000 steps a day? This is going to be the key. To walk at mealtime, not after meals. Walk while you're eating, especially if you're taking a meal at home. You have no one around you. You can just as easily just grab your meal on your plate, in your Tupperware container, however you choose to have it, and just walk around your living room, Walk around your kitchen as you're gobbling up that meal. You can even combine that with a post-meal walk. So you take 20 minutes, for example, to finish your meal. That's 2,000 steps. Then you decide to go for another 10-minute walk. So now, instead of just getting 1,000 steps after a meal, now you get 2,000 steps during the meal. While you're eating that meal, you're walking around. And then after you finish eating, you get another 1,000 steps. So that's 3,000 steps combined at each meal. Imagine that adds up for each meal. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, you're getting 3,000 steps per meal. That's 9,000 steps. That's almost 10,000 steps just from eating your meals. So that is what actually allowed me to very easily scale up from walking 25,000 steps to over and consistently over 33,000 steps a day, because I was constantly dealing with this problem. I was probably at my lean or my desired lean physique at 9.7% body fat in 2024, then 10.5% body fat in 2025, each time building more muscle, because after each calorie deficit I went on maintenance or did like a slight lean bulk to put on some more muscle. And each time I kept on finding myself reaching a blockade at 25,000 steps. And I just couldn't figure out how I could cross that blockade. And I know for most of you guys would probably just go on a long ass walk in the park, long ass walk out in nature to rack up 30,000 steps. But I'm talking about 30,000 steps every single day, right? Weekdays included, work days included. So obviously you're not going to be able to go to the park every single day, especially if you're working 8 hours a day. So how do you do that? You do that by adding in these intrameal walks, as I like to call them. But again, this is an advanced tip. I'm not going to expect everyone to follow this, especially at the outset. Just remember to walk after a meal. If most of you all watching this video implement this simple strategy and at least stop sitting down to digest your meals, that'll go a long way for keeping you not only lean year-round, but also decreasing your risk for a pretty nasty metabolic syndrome disease like type 2 diabetes. And now let's get into the last mistake that most of you all are making. Want to double check if I didn't miss anything else? Nope, we're on track for the last one. The last one is the fact that a lot of people complain about feeling really tired, really exhausted, maybe even aches and pains all over their body, especially their legs, the plantar surfaces of their feet from walking over 15K, 16K, 20, 25K steps. Don't blame the walking. Don't blame the daily walking for those aches and pains. You're not feeling tired because the walking is draining you. Remember, this is low intensity, steady state cardio. It's not supposed to take a toll on your body, right? This ain't running. This ain't high intensity cardio, so it's not going to mess up your joints, tendons, ligaments. In fact, it's your fault. You're not fueling your body properly before you go on these walks or throughout your day. Right? You're not consuming a diet that's comprised of enough protein and carbohydrates. Notice I didn't mention fat. You just need fat to support normal hormone synthesis. And for most men and women, that's just going to be about anywhere around 60 to 70 grams a day. Anything more than that is just a bonus. Obviously, you probably don't even need more. I know fans and practitioners of the carnivore diet typically consume over 100 grams of fat, but we're not talking about that here. By the way, those same carnivore diet folks are probably getting pissed off right now, the fact that I'm going to talk about carbs. But carbs are a quick energy source, and they're 100% going to be needed to fuel high volume daily walking. Maybe you can get away with a keto diet while walking 10,000 steps or less. But if you want to stay lean year round, if you want to actually retain those abs and never let that belly fat come back again, then you're going to have to consistently cross over 25K, 30,000 steps a day. And for that, you need to consume carbohydrates. Remember, carbohydrates aren't the enemy. Refined carbohydrates from crappy ass ultra processed food is going to be the enemy, the real enemy. What you need to do is instead invest in carbohydrates from complex sources, from starchy sources like sweet potatoes, even russet potatoes or regular potatoes, quinoa, oats or old-fashioned oats or steeled oats, vegetables. These are all great carb sources, even rice, right? Just make sure you measure out your rice. You're not filling a plate full of rice every time you eat lunch and dinner or whatever. Be strategic about how you're selecting your carbs. Use a kitchen scale to measure them out, and I guarantee you're not going to overdo it. You're not going to overconsume calories due to carbohydrates. Similarly, for protein, you got to make sure that you're prioritizing protein in your meals as well. High carbs and high protein. And protein, I'm going to recommend complete protein sources, which means, in my estimation and in my opinion, take it or leave it, animal protein is going to be the number one source of protein here. So whole eggs, number one. Red meat, like ground beef, for example, my favorite go-to source of red meat. Chicken breast, chicken thighs, salmon, so basically fatty fish, salmon, sardines. All of these are fantastic sources for complete protein. They give you all of your essential as well as non-essential amino acids that you need to basically build out your body, right? Not only does resistance training take a toll on your body, but you need to properly rest and recover from high volume daily walking. Of course, it's not going to mess up your joints and tendons like progressively overloading would on high intensity cardio, even, lifting heavy weights, powerlifting, for example. But you still need to give your body an opportunity to rest and recover in the evenings. So you need protein to aid that rest and recovery on a nightly basis. Sleep is also going to be very important, right? Because if you don't sleep, you're not going to recover, and those who sleep less live less. And of course, hydration. Add that to the list as well. So a diet that's comprised of high carbs, high protein, and plenty of water. I recommend at least a gallon of water. But if you're drinking that much water, make sure you're salting your meals, right? Salting your eggs in the morning, salting your animal meats during lunch and dinner. Make sure you're getting enough salt, because on my own personal experience, you might see some low sodium and chloride values, especially when you take your blood work after sticking to a very clean, 100% clean diet comprised of only single ingredient whole foods. So all of these are walking mistakes that are easily avoidable, especially if you follow all these tips that I've outlined one after the other. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Until next time, just walk, baby.